She was not just a perfect body on the runway. She was not just the soft voice whispering to Paris. Carla Bruni was contradiction, made flesh, muse, and predator, lover and first lady, shadow and light in a single breath. The world knew her as a supermodel, desired her as a singer, and judged her as the wife of a president. But behind the flashes, there was another story, that of a woman who learned to use her beauty as a weapon, her voice as a shield, and her silence as strategy. She loved men who wrote rock anthems, played with the desire of the international press, and ended up seated on the invisible throne of French power. Was it a fairy tale or a carefully painted facade? Carla Bruni was a scandal in heels, a poisoned song, a smile that could seduce or destroy. And on that dangerous edge between art and politics, she became an enigma no one ever managed to solve. This is not the story of a model. This is the story of a woman who turned every stage of her life into a performance and made the entire world her captive audience. Carla Gilberta Bruni Tedeschi was born on the 23rd of December 1967 in Turin, Italy, into a family that seemed to live inside a musical staff. Music was the secret language of the house. Her mother, a concert pianist, filled the rooms with classical chords, while her father, a wealthy industrialist, cultivated art as if it were an inevitable luxury. At first glance, it was the childhood of a bourgeois princess, a story wrapped in silk. But beneath that appearance, cracks were already forming. When Carla was only 7, the family moved to France to escape the threat of the Anni di Piombo, the years of lead, those dark times of terrorism and violence in Italy. In that golden exile, the Brunis found refuge in a mansion near Paris, where the little girl began absorbing French culture as if she had carried it in her blood all along. Language, literature, music, everything became nourishment for her precocious and curious mind. But Carla's life was not as simple as that of a sheltered heiress. In her adolescence, she uncovered an uncomfortable truth. The man she called father was not her real father. Her biological father was a musician, a close friend of the family. The secret had been buried under layers of silence and elegance, but when it came to light, it left an indelible mark. That revelation made Carla a young woman defined by duality, legitimate daughter and illegitimate daughter at once. A duality that would later echo in everything she became: model and singer, muse and first lady, angel and femme fatale. By the age of 16, Carla had already learned to wield that blend of privilege and vulnerability as her own language. Tall, slender, with feline features and a gaze that could be as cold as it was hypnotic, she became a natural magnet for the fashion world. She studied art and architecture in Paris, but her destiny seemed written on another runway, one of desire and power. The contrast between her refined upbringing and her secret origins made her fascinating from the very beginning. She grew up between box scores and family secrets, between French gardens and Italian silences. That cultural and emotional collision forged a young woman unafraid of reinvention. The girl who had learned to navigate 2 languages, 2 countries, and 2 truths would later become the woman who could move between 2 worlds, the frivolity of luxury and the brutality of politics. Carla Bruni was not shaped only by private schools. Her true education was secrecy and contradiction. And from there would be born the woman who, years later, would place the world at her feet while always keeping part of herself in the shadows. Paris, the late 80s. While the city burned with creativity and excess, a young Italian woman with feline eyes began walking the same halls where the names that dictated the future of fashion gathered. Carla Bruni had something different. It wasn't just beauty. It was the aura of someone who seemed to carry a secret in every gesture. Her first major contract came at barely 20, when the agency, City Models, bet on her as the next big promise. Within months, her face was appearing in campaigns that set the trends. Gianni Versace, Christian Dior, Chanel, all wanted her, all needed her. And Carla, with that elegant, distant stride, seemed to enjoy the sensation of the world bowing at her feet. The 90s were the age of the supermodels, and Bruni became one of them. She shared the stage with Claudia Schiffer, Naomi Campbell, Cindy Crawford, Helena Christensen, but her magnetism was different. While the others embodied exuberance, force, or American sensuality, Carla represented European sophistication, cold, enigmatic, almost untouchable. In every show, her eyes seemed to say, "You may look at me, but you will never possess me." Fashion magazines turned her into a recurring cover star. Vogue, Elle, Harper's Bazaar. Her face didn't just sell clothes. It sold an idea, that of a woman who could be both muse and mistress of herself. Photographers adored her because she was never predictable. She could appear as tender as an Italian song or as frozen as a Parisian sculpture. That duality made her an object of endless fascination. But fashion was not only glamour. It was also a battlefield. Behind every runway was fierce competition. Behind every backstage curtain lay intrigue and jealousy. Carla learned quickly that modeling wasn't about posing, it was about surviving. Her weapon was intelligence. She didn't let herself be dragged into cheap scandals. She didn't need to shout to be heard. Her calculated silence was enough. The money poured in. Carla earned millions from advertising campaigns and exclusive contracts. She could have bought any luxury she desired, but what she really amassed was social power. At haute couture parties, she rubbed shoulders with designers, businessmen, musicians, politicians. The model was beginning to transform into something more dangerous, a cultural icon. But the summit always exacts a price. The public looked at her with desire, but also with morbid curiosity. Her love life began to turn into a parallel spectacle to the catwalks. Rumors of romances with rock stars flooded the tabloids. Was she a muse or a predator? A lover or a strategist? Each headline added another shadowy layer to her image. Carla Bruni didn't just parade clothes. She paraded an identity. With every step on the runway, she was building a character larger than herself, the supermodel who seemed untouchable, the modern sphinx of fashion. But deep down, amid blinding lights and insatiable cameras, something else was brewing. Because for Carla, fashion would never be the final destination, but merely a transitional stage towards something even more unsettling. The fashion world had already made her an untouchable figure, but it was her love life that catapulted her into the realm of media myth. Carla Bruni didn't just collect million-dollar contracts, she collected impossible loves, romances that seemed scripted by a writer obsessed with excess and drama. The tabloids called her the man-eater. And it wasn't an insult, it was a crown that placed her in the same league as Hollywood's great femmes fatales. Eric Clapton fell under her spell. Mick Jagger, the eternal Rolling Stone, also succumbed to that blend of sophistication and mystery. The press described her gaze as sweet poison. Whoever got caught in it was never the same again. But every conquest brought with it a scandal. Clapton and Jagger were friends, rivals in music, and Bruni became the epicenter of an explosive triangle that the press devoured with glee. The headlines weren't about her runways or her contracts anymore. They were about the jealousy of legendary rock stars. The myth of the supermodel merged with the narrative of sin, and Carla seemed to play with that fire without fear of burning. It wasn't just musicians. There were businessmen, artists, politicians. Her list of lovers became an inventory of power and glamour. And every name linked to hers reinforced the image of a woman who didn't settle for being admired. She wanted to influence, to leave her mark. The public was divided. For some, she was a free woman defying the limits imposed on models. For others, she was a calculating seductress who wielded desire as a weapon. But everyone agreed on one thing. She could not be ignored. Wherever Carla Bruni appeared, the air changed. The room became a stage, and the men around her, secondary actors in a script written by her. Yet fame as a devourer also demanded a sacrifice. Her name became associated more with romantic scandals than with art or fashion. And although many thought this would mark her downfall, Carla turned it into yet another platform. When the runways could no longer contain her, she decided to reinvent herself. She picked up a guitar, let her husky, melancholy voice emerge, and announced to the world that her next conquest would not be men or fashion shows, but music itself. The scandalous supermodel was about to metamorphose into a singer-songwriter. And, as always in her life, that transformation would leave no one indifferent. When it seemed Carla Bruni had already conquered the heights of fashion and that her romances filled more headlines than her runways, she took an unexpected turn. She abandoned the blinding lights of haute couture to embrace something far more intimate, music. And in that gesture, once again, she left everyone disoriented. The press assumed it would be a passing whim, a distraction for a model weary of catwalks. But when, in 2002, she released her debut album, Quelqu'un m'a dit, skepticism gave way to astonishment. The songs, most of them written by her own hand, distilled a refined melancholy, an emotional nakedness no one expected from the scandalous supermodel. Her voice, husky, whispering, didn't seek to dazzle with technique, it seduced with fragility. France surrendered. The record sold over 1 million copies, becoming a phenomenon. Critics, who at first looked at her with condescension, ended up acknowledging her talent. In every chord, Carla seemed to confess a secret. No longer was she the untouchable sphinx of the runway. She was the woman bearing her wounds through an acoustic guitar. The contrast was brutal. The same press that had painted her as a rock star's huntress now portrayed her as a melancholic troubadour. The public discovered that behind the headlines there was sensitivity, poetry, a profound desire to express herself without filters. Quelqu'un m'a dit wasn't a perfect album, but it was authentic. And that authenticity became her most powerful weapon. This metamorphosis wasn't accidental. From childhood, she had been surrounded by music, between sheet music and composers. The artistic DNA was there, dormant, waiting. And when she released it, the result was a different Carla. Less scandalous, more intimate, but just as magnetic. The success continued with her subsequent projects. Her music drifted between folk, French chanson, and a whisper that always seemed personal, directed at a single listener. To hear her was to share a secret in a dimly lit room. But in Carla Bruni's life, nothing remained stable for long. While she was conquering the world with her songs, another destiny crept in silently: politics. Because her story was never linear, but rather a perpetual game of reinventions. And the next transformation would be the most surprising of all. From Bohemian Muse to First Lady of France, 2007 changed everything. France turned its gaze toward the Élysée Palace with anticipation. Nicolas Sarkozy had just become president. Amid the speeches, the promises, and the political tension, she appeared. The supermodel turned bohemian singer was suddenly transformed into the official companion of the most powerful man in the country. The relationship was vertiginous. Barely months after meeting, Carla Bruni and Nicolas Sarkozy married in an intimate ceremony inside the Élysée itself in February 2008. All of France was stunned. The woman who had seduced rock legends and sold records with her velvet voice was now the First Lady of the Republic. Headlines multiplied. From the runway to power, from muse to president's wife, the world watched with both fascination and skepticism. Carla embodied a new kind of First Lady, not the discreet spouse hidden in the shadows, but a magnetic figure dragging behind her decades of glamour and controversy. For some, she was a masterstroke of modernity. For others, a scandal staining the solemnity of the presidency. At every official visit, Carla Bruni became the center of attention. It didn't matter which president or world leader stood at her side, the cameras always found her. Dressed in Dior, Hermes, or Valentino, she embodied French sophistication, though with an Italian accent that betrayed her origins. She was diplomacy turned into style. But politics does not forgive. Her detractors unearthed everything: her past romances, her runway photos, even the lyrics of her songs. Every step was dissected with cruelty. Could a former supermodel with a turbulent past truly represent the dignity of France? That was the question hanging in the air. Carla, however, played her own game. She did not try to erase her past, she embraced it with natural ease. She responded to criticism with an almost provocative calm, as if each attack only made her stronger. She reinvented herself as First Lady with a blend of elegance and rebellion, supporting social causes, engaging in the fight against AIDS, promoting art and culture. She turned political exposure into yet another stage. The contrast was mesmerizing, from the nightclubs of London and New York to official dinners at the Vatican, from being a rock muse to listening to national anthems alongside global leaders. Carla Bruni was never linear. She was always metamorphosis. For Sarkozy, her presence was a double-edged sword. It elevated him with glamour, made him more visible on the international stage, but also generated constant controversy. For Carla, it was another trial by fire, proving she could survive not only the ruthless world of fashion, but the far more brutal one of politics. And she did. With every appearance, she consolidated an image impossible to ignore. Carla Bruni, the First Lady of France, was at once a mirror of contradictions. Singer and presidential spouse, rock muse and cultural ambassador, desired woman and institutional figure, France had never had a First Lady like her. But as in every chapter of her life, after the brightness would come the shadow. Because the higher Carla Bruni rose, the harsher the public's gaze became. And the question began to repeat itself in whispers. Was she a free woman who had conquered every stage, or a prisoner of her own legend? Being First Lady of France did not mean only haute couture gowns and diplomatic dinners. For Carla Bruni, it meant living under a permanent microscope, where every gesture was dissected, every word analyzed, every silence turned into suspicion. France, with its tradition of sharp intellectuals and a ferocious press, was never going to easily forgive her supermodel origins or her legendary lovers. The criticism came from the very first day. Some saw her as an exotic trophy in Sarkozy's life, a jewel that added glamour but stripped the presidency of gravitas. Others painted her as a dangerous femme fatale, capable of eclipsing the president himself. Detractors reduced her to caricatures: the ex-model with a murky past, the whispering singer who should never have stepped into politics. The tabloids unearthed old runway photos, stories of past romances, even lyrics from her sensual, melancholic songs. Everything was used as evidence that she was not fit to represent France. Gossip columns spoke of her private life as if they were official state chronicles. Carla, however, did not crumble. She responded with a calm that irritated her critics even more. In interviews, she spoke of love, of art, of culture, as if politics slipped off her like rain on glass. Was it naivety or strategy? Many accused her of frivolity, of living in a parallel world while France faced economic crisis and social unrest. But in truth, Bruni was playing her own part. She knew she could never erase her past, so she turned it into part of her persona. She carried herself with serenity, almost irony. She would say that she was criticized because she was too visible, and that she preferred that to being invisible. With such remarks, she disarmed more than one journalist. The weight of expectation was brutal. She was not only the president's wife, she was expected to embody a national image of dignity, a figure representing French womanhood to the world. And for many, that woman could not be the same one who had once strutted half-naked down Versace's runway or graced tabloids alongside Mick Jagger. The contrast between the public Carla and the private Carla grew sharper. At the Élysée, she had to maintain composure, but in private, she remained an artist. She strummed her guitar in solitude, composing songs she could not always share with the world, as if music were the only space where she could still be free. The criticism wasn't confined to France. On international trips, foreign media dredged up her modeling past, as if it were an unforgivable sin. When she visited Pope Benedict XVI, newspapers highlighted her old sensual campaigns more than the purpose of the diplomatic visit. Carla knew. For many, she would never stop being the supermodel disguised as a first lady. And yet, it was precisely that contradiction that kept her in the spotlight. Carla Bruni did not vanish under pressure. She absorbed it, transformed it into mystery. She knew she would never convince everyone. Instead of trying to please, she chose to remain faithful to her style. Distant, sophisticated, enigmatic. Public pressure was without doubt one of the hardest chapters of her life, but it was also the crucible in which she refined her final persona. The woman who had survived the cruel world of fashion was now proving she could withstand the even more ruthless world of politics. And, as always in Carla Bruni's story, what seemed a limit became yet another reinvention. Because while critics tried to destroy her image, she turned it into something bigger, a symbol impossible to classify. In the hard world of French politics, full of numbers, reforms, and parliamentary battles, Carla Bruni embodied something different: soft power. She did not draft laws or sign decrees, yet her mere presence could shift the atmosphere of a summit or ease the tension of a diplomatic meeting. She was a silent weapon in the Élysée's arsenal, though she denied it with a smile. Her style became an unofficial policy. When she accompanied Sarkozy on state visits, she didn't need to deliver speeches. Photographers, newspapers, even world leaders inevitably turned their focus toward her. In England, she was compared to Jackie Kennedy for her elegance. In Italy, she was celebrated as a prodigal daughter who had conquered Paris. In the United States, she was seen as a chic enigma, half-bohemian singer, half-sophisticated first lady. Carla played with that duality. At official events, she appeared in sober, discreet gowns, yet always impeccably tailored. At the same time, she never abandoned her essence as an artist. Her voice remained soft, her gestures measured, her air of mystery intact. It was impossible not to notice her, and at the same time, impossible to fully decipher her. But her influence went beyond fashion or aesthetics. Carla Bruni used her visibility to support cultural and social causes. She became an ambassador for the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, defended educational programs, and promoted music and the arts. Whenever she spoke, it was with the sensitivity of an artist more than the rigidity of a politician. And that nuance made her stand apart. Critics, of course, accused her of frivolity. They said she was only the singer with a guitar, a decorative figure without real weight. But international diplomacy understood something else. Charisma can be more powerful than any speech. Carla represented cultural France, sensual, artistic, refined, and that face of the nation was as useful as any official strategy. Silently, she wove networks. She won sympathies where Sarkozy sparked tension. Her mere presence softened the tone of summits. In many ways, she became France's secret card in international politics, not through orders or formal authority, but with something far more intangible: charm, mystery, and culture. Yet being both a cultural and diplomatic icon meant living in paradox. While some praised her as a modern symbol of France, others accused her of overshadowing the president himself. It was said that at times her popularity outshone Sarkozy's, and in politics, that imbalance could be dangerous. Carla seemed to navigate it calmly. She never raised her voice, never confronted her critics directly. Her strategy was different: to let the cameras speak, to let the images travel the world and build a narrative more powerful than any controversy. That is how she consolidated herself as more than a first lady. She became a cultural icon, a figure who embodied a form of power impossible to measure, but undeniable in its effects. Carla Bruni proved that one does not need a political title to influence history. All it takes is to exist in the right place, with just the right blend of magnetism and enigma. And in that game, as always, she was a master. Carla Bruni lived on a divided stage. To some, she remained the fragile muse, the singer with the velvety voice whispering secrets in an intimate language. To others, she was a political figure, bound to embody the dignity of France in every gesture. That tension defined her public image, a pendulum swinging between art and power, between vulnerability and authority. The press became obsessed with this duality. When she released an album, headlines focused more on her role as First Lady than on her songs. When she appeared at official events, journalists searched for traces of the supermodel who had once walked for Versace and Dior. Carla became a mirror where each audience projected what they wished to see: muse, wife, artist, seductress, politician. In interviews, she nurtured the enigma. She spoke with a disarming calm, in short phrases, as if every word had been carefully weighed. She avoided direct confrontation, yet never forgot the power of her image. Her silences spoke louder than her declarations. In public, her posture was impeccable: straight back, measured smile, serene gaze. Yet in her songs, another Carla emerged. Lyrics steeped in melancholy, desire, loss, as if music were the only place where she could afford the fragility denied to her in politics. That duality fascinated, because it showed that the woman who seemed carved from marble before the cameras was, at the same time, profoundly human when alone with her guitar. This contradiction also made her an easy target. Critics accused her of living in a bubble, of playing at being an artist when she should have been institutional. They claimed she used her political role to promote herself as a singer. But the truth was that Carla never tried to separate the two. To her, both facets were inseparable. She was model, she was musician, she was first lady, and she refused to renounce any of those identities. In the eyes of the international public, this mixture was enthralling. Carla Bruni embodied the myth of modern femininity, a woman who defied categories, who could not be reduced to a single role. In politics, where everything is rigid, she brought mystery. In art, where everything is emotional, she brought discipline. But this public image came at a cost. Living trapped in a persona meant that her private self was often devoured by the collective. Every gesture was interpreted, every choice judged. To be both muse and political figure was, in truth, an act of resistance. Carla Bruni, aware of this, chose to embrace the paradox rather than flee from it. In her figure, fragility and power did not cancel each other out, they amplified one another. She could appear vulnerable and yet inaccessible, artist and symbol. And that image, built between runways, guitars, and diplomatic protocols, ultimately made her one of the most enigmatic icons of her time. When the lights of politics dimmed and Sarkozy's name stopped dominating the headlines, Carla Bruni returned to what had always been her refuge: music. Because despite the runways, the scandals, and the Élysée Palace, her voice and her guitar had remained the secret thread running through all her metamorphoses. Her cultural legacy cannot be measured only in albums sold or magazine covers. The true inheritance of Carla Bruni lies in having shown that a woman can move between worlds that seem irreconcilable. The luxury of fashion, the harshness of politics, the intimacy of song, and not only survive, but shine in all of them. In France, her music became part of the soundtrack of the early 21st century. Songs like Quelqu'un me dit or Raphael accompanied a generation that found in her voice a counterpoint to modern coldness, a melancholy whisper inviting reflection. Her lyrics, simple yet poetic, spoke of love, loss, and desire with an honesty that recalled the tradition of French troubadours. Her figure also reopened the cultural debate about the role of muses in history. Bruni was not only inspired by powerful men and legendary artists, she herself inspired writers, musicians, photographers. Her life became the symbol of a complex kind of femininity, capable of seducing and creating, of loving and deciding. In that sense, her legacy transcends music and enters the realm of the socio-cultural. Beyond France, her name became an international reference for the modern chanson française. Her unmistakable timbre ensured her a place in the lineage of intimate voices from Françoise Hardy to Jane Birkin, but with a unique nuance: the ex-supermodel who turned vulnerability into art. Carla Bruni's cultural impact is also measured in what she represents as a media figure. In an era where labels seemed to define everything, she broke them again and again. She was a model when no one believed in the intelligence of models. She was a singer when everyone expected frivolity. She was First Lady when her past seemed incompatible with protocol. Her legacy, then, is not merely aesthetic or musical. It is a manifesto of constant reinvention. Time softened the ferocity of her critics. Today, many of them admit that her music has withstood the passing years, and that her figure brought a different air to French politics. The image of Carla Bruni endures as that of a woman who never allowed the world to define her, but instead used it as a mirror to project her own narrative, with all the contradictions it entailed. Her legacy, ultimately, is this: to prove that fragility can be strength, that beauty can be voice, and that even under the world's relentless judgment, a woman can reinvent herself again and again without losing her essence. Carla Bruni was not only a supermodel, nor only a singer, nor only a first lady. She was all of that at once. And her cultural and musical legacy is the echo of that paradox transformed into myth. Carla Bruni's life reads like an impossible script, a kaleidoscope where every turn reveals a new facet. She was the girl who uncovered family secrets that shaped her identity. The supermodel who reigned over the runways of the 90s, surrounded by lights and rivalries. The lover who set tabloids ablaze with legendary romances. The singer who surprised France with an intimate, melancholic voice. The First Lady, who divided opinions, adored and despised with equal passion. Between myth and reality, Bruni never ceased to be an enigma. Her beauty was an entryway, but never her only legacy. Her voice proved there was a soul behind the image. Her foray into politics showed she could endure an arena even more brutal than fashion. And in every reinvention, she left behind a lesson, that of a woman who never accepted the world's definitions, but instead used it as a mirror to project her own narrative. Today, when speaking of Carla Bruni, it is no longer enough to call her supermodel or First Lady. Her figure embodies the paradox of modernity, a woman free yet judged, an artist sensitive yet a symbol of power, A fragile muse, yet a calculating strategist. Her life cannot be confined to one category, because she herself made sure to break them all. Carla Bruni is, in the end, proof that myths are not born from perfection, but from contradictions. And in that ambiguous terrain, between the public and the intimate, between glory and scandal, her name will continue to shine as a mystery no one has ever fully unraveled.